BitVM is the most exciting technical thing happening on Bitcoin today, but I still don't think it's ready for big money, and I'm not sure it ever will be. So what is BitVM? In essence, BitVM is the ability to do multi-party financial transactions on top of Bitcoin. So as of today, the only way to natively do Bitcoin financial transactions is two-party. So I can borrow from one party specifically, or I can trade with one party specifically. On the other hand, BitVM and multi-party transactions allow me to trade with or borrow from a large group in aggregate. And that saves costs because I don't just have to focus on one specific individual. I can focus on this big aggregate group. In essence, BitVM, it's like going to a bar and dropping your coat at the check. You take your coat off and they give you a ticket, then you go to the bar and you go throughout your night. In the case of BitVM, you would be trading or borrowing against your assets and then coming back and trying to get your Bitcoin or your coat out of the bar by passing them a receipt, which will scan as green. So that is the verifier portion, which says and adjudicates the truth of what happened on the layer 2. Unfortunately, there are some things that we have to consider when we're using BitVM because we're no longer just using pure Bitcoin tooling, Bitcoin script, Bitcoin transactions. BitVM needs to be perfect across 3 risk spectrums. First is soundness of verifier, and just today we saw an exploit in Zcash's verifier from Opus 4.8. Second, EVM code. We cannot have the exploits that are abundant on Ethereum happening on Bitcoin. And third is implementation. And while the BitVM teams are the most genius teams in the entire world, it is still very hard to implement a zero-knowledge proof with the limitations of Bitcoin script. It doesn't have multiplication, it doesn't have concatenation. This is not an easy job. So the actual implementation of BitVM on Bitcoin is also a risk that you have to be considerate of when you're bridging on BitVM. Over the last couple of years, there have been a couple issues in verifiers. In particular, SP1, the verifier that many BitVM implementations are actually built on top of, had a soundness issue, essentially allowing you to take a red ticket and pass it off as a green ticket. By taking what should have been a red ticket and turning it into a green ticket, you're able to peg out Bitcoin, which wasn't supposed to be yours, onto the main chain. And then, as we know, it's gone. Now, to be fair, the current BitVM implementations have closed federation lists, so only certain individuals can actually enforce and provide a proof to peg Bitcoin out of the bar or of the BitVM. So you would have to actually have someone from a known list be the person who is spoofing this verifiable proof. However, BitVM is very much looking to move towards being as permissionless as possible, which would make this a really big issue. If you can take a red ticket and you can turn it into a green ticket, and we're continuing to solve these issues, at some point some money's going to get stolen, and the longer you have your Bitcoin sitting on that coat rack, the more likely someone is to check out with it. Now, assuming the academic implementation of your zero-knowledge proof verifier is sound to begin with, you still have to actually implement that in Bitcoin's code, which famously doesn't have a lot of the things that you would need to implement a zero-knowledge proof verifier in Bitcoin script. Again, it's just a time value of money. The longer that you have it there, the longer that you're risking implementation being correct, there being no soundness bug found in and the longer that you're risking your funds sitting in a virtual machine contract, the more risk that's accruing on your capital. And I'm not saying that you should never use that. I'm just saying that you need to make sure that you're being rewarded for that. You have the implementation of the verifier. You have the soundness of the verifier, and you have the virtual machine code that your Bitcoin is sitting in. And all of that accrues the longer that your Bitcoin sits there.